Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you the top 10 loudest Ark Tames because I thought it would be pretty funny. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. Now the Pteranodon kind of has to be here. Like, you might not think of the Pteranodon as a very loud tame, but if you have one of these creatures knocked out, you should see how loud their snoring is. Honestly, go try it, go out there, knock out a Pteranodon. They snore louder than any Ark creature in the game as far as I'm concerned, and it's also quite an annoying one as well, which, you know, does play to the benefit of them being quite loud creatures. And you can kind of say some of these creatures also are annoying in their own ways, but most of them aren't, whereas this one definitely is a bit more of a memey one, a bit more of a jokey one, because come on, the Pteranodon, it's here on this list because of just how loudly it snores when it tames. It's here as a bit of a joke, obviously, because it's not going to be like a Bronto or a Golem or a Titanosaur, those kind of creatures, but still, the Pteranodon definitely is a very, very loud snorer. Next up, we have got the Rock Drake, and come on, with a creature like this, you would expect it to be here, because if you have ever climbed around a surface on a Rock Drake, all you can hear is the clattering of its little claws over everything, and basically anything they do will be inherently noisy. There's not really any sneaking with these things whatsoever. The gliding obviously is noisy, just the general clattering of their claws on rocks are noisy, and just them landing and attacking, it's always constantly just the decibels are going flying when you're using one of these creatures. But it's definitely well worth it with a creature like this. They are insanely great creatures which can be found on Arbration. Not sure if they're on any other maps, to be honest, but you know, leave a comment down below if they are. I'm not talking about mod maps, I'm just talking about general official ones, because I'm pretty sure it's Arbration exclusive and they're really well adverse to that map. Like, you can pretty much get anywhere with absolute ease on Arbration with a Rock Drake. Other maps, they do struggle a little bit because there's a lack of things for them to grip onto, but still, they really do work on their home map and they're designed for it, so you can't really blame the designer of this creature for that. These are truly great creatures, would definitely recommend one, but if you really don't like the continuous sound of claws clattering on rock, then maybe this quite isn't the tame for you. Next up, we have got the Carno, an all-time favourite of mine, but still, with a creature like this, their foot stomps are so loud considering their size. Like, even something like an Aloe, I find they tend to be a little bit quieter, or at least to me. Maybe it's some kind of placebo making me feel like these things are even louder than they actually are, but who knows. But to me, they are very loud creatures. They are, that's probably what I meant there. You know, there's lots of different ways of saying the same thing, but, you know, that was wrong. Either way, these creatures, if you ever heard them, foot stomps, they are very, very loud with it. Like, you might be like, oh my god, there's a Rex attacking my base or something like that, and then you just find it's one of these things. It's why you always obviously turn off that camera shake scale, as who even bothers to have that on anymore? Like, I know the camera shake scale is there for like effect, but with some big creatures in the game, it's really annoying. And even with some non-big creatures like the Carno, the camera is shaking around like crazy, and it's simply something which I do not need. Although these are creatures which I use quite a lot, and I definitely do like, and obviously they deal the bleed ability as well. Just, that's generally quite a nice thing to have. And on top of that as well, they deal quite hefty amounts of damage on top of said bleed ability. They're quite mobile, small, agile, nimble carnivores, so that does help them. And yeah, they're not particularly the best for stealth, considering just how loud their feet stomps actually are. In at number 7, we have got ourselves the Rex. This creature is here because it's a very large carnivore, and it definitely does have its big amount of foot stomping. You can't really demote it for said foot stomping. The Rex is a creature of great power, obviously, and considering its age, it makes sense why it is so loud. It's kind of one of the most powerful creatures of back in the day, but now you can get some bigger creatures that actually make a little bit less noise than this thing. But obviously the general trend is that they will make noise. The bigger they get, that's how things would work. And obviously this is another reason why you turn off that camera shake scale, because these things shake your screen like crazy. And you can actually see a Carno in the distance there briefly. You can just see some there, and you can see how much smaller a Carno is than a Rex, and it's actually kind of crazy how much noise the Carno gives off compared to the Rex. Like, honestly, it's concerning. What have they got in their feet? Either way, the Rex, obviously a really great creature, capable of like boss fights and all of the above, really does work effectively because of its high health, but also it deals loads of damage. Not the best swimmers, but I don't think you're going to be using it for swimming, unlike AI said in one of my later videos, when AI was like, yeah, these things are pretty good at swimming. I really don't think they are. They're actually some of the worst carnivores for swimming out there, but you know, if you have to take them across some water, it's not going to be the most painful thing in the world, but not advised. Now, we've got the Carcharodontosaurus, and this creature kind of did have to be here. Come on, this creature is of an immense size, and obviously with it, you're going to get a lot of noise. You can say the Giga kind of falls into this as well, although that is a little bit later in the list for a bit of a different reason in a way. I feel like it's just has more damage output, not damage output, sorry, noise output than this creature. Again, this thing just seems a little bit quieter, and maybe partly because I've spent less time with the Giga. But either way, just talking about this creature, we'll save that for later on in the video. These things are capable of a lot of noise, obviously. They're very big, and you kind of, so the Titanosaur is in not a similar boat to this thing, but you know, they're reasonably close if you compare the size of the two and how much noise they output. The Titanosaur isn't on this list, by the way, but I'll give it a brief mention here because I probably put it around this spot. I haven't really spent too much time with them, so I've not got the biggest amount of accuracy, but they're not the loudest things out there as far as I'm concerned. But I might also chuck them in the number one spot with the creature I've got there. But you can probably tell where this creature deals a lot of noise output, if you can say, deals a lot of noise output. It's big, bulky carnivore, very useful, actually very cool to tame. You can find them all over Ragnarok. That's my recommended map for them. Definitely get one if you haven't already. In at number 5, we have got the Rock Golem, and this creature, again, it's pretty obvious why it's here. It's just a big hunking beast made out of rocks. It's obvious that this creature is going to output a lot of noise. It definitely is by no means a stealthy one, and that camera shake is going to be obscene as well. Obviously, I've got it turned off throughout all of this, and actually I'm not sure what kind of effect it has while you're riding a creature. I haven't really noticed, but it's mainly when you're off a creature and then there's just a big thing around, and then it's just going to be stomping all over the place, and it's obviously not going to be the best for you. But you know, they're very big noise outputters, but they're also very big damage outputters. You can just see how quickly it demolished that deathworm there, which, you know, you've got to demolish them deathworms on Scorched Earth because you can get Mantis, and the Mantis is a pretty decent creature, and also just killing deathworms is generally fun. Do you like killing deathworms? Comment that down below. Is that a thing you like? Is that a thing you don't like? Either way, very loud creatures, but for a very obvious reason. Now, next up on our list, we have got ourselves the Giga. Don't know what it is to me, but the Giga has always been much louder than the Carcharodontosaurus to me. Just from my perspective of things, it's just a big hunking beast that really does output a lot of noise, and obviously a lot of shake as well. You definitely do know when there is a Giga about, and also their roars are pretty loud as well, so you've got to watch out for all of that too. And you know, with all of that, you're going to get loads and loads of noise output. But again, it does make sense. This thing is a massive beast of a carnivore. Now Rexes and Spinos and all those creatures look really tiny compared to it. It's like Carno to Rex, Rex up to that Giga. Like, it's insane actually how big carnivores even get in Ark, and it seems crazy that this is also still a 2015 creature. It was out within the first not even a year of the game being out. It's insane how long this thing has been in the game for. My brain is still struggling to comprehend everything, but it's very obvious why this thing makes lots of noise. But it is a must-have tame for anyone out there, just purely because why not, and also just because, especially on extinctions, very useful for defeating the bosses, and obviously on PvP they're pretty good creatures as well, although the Carcharodontosaurus is better for that use, and for the bosses on extinction. But you might as well tame them at some point if you haven't already, but I'm sure most of you have. In at number 3, we have got ourselves the Reaper, and their roar is so tremendously loud. I did have to put it in here, and also they're generally quite a bit of a stomper as well. It makes sense, they are of such high status on Operation, they really do deserve to make a lot of noise in a way. In some cases, like a creature that makes loads of noise, it shows that it is a big, powerful, beefy creature. In some cases also, it's just really a general annoyance with creatures like the Carno, and a creature that's slightly later on in the list. Hit that one spot actually, it makes sense, but it's not really the big beefy powerhouse that something like a Reaper is. But if you've ever still got your volume on the default settings in Ark and you're fighting with one of these things, you're going to get a lot of noise coming through your speakers or headphones or earbuds, whatever you're using to output said sound to you. Or if you just have your TV or whatever on mute, the sound is still definitely going to emerge through all of that. You're just going to hear so much from these creatures. It really sounds like so many things are dying, even including your creature, but I assure you, your Reaper will be fine, because these things are absolute tanks. Definitely should tame them at some point, especially on Arbration, because it's a lot more of an experience, but you can do it on Gen 2 as well, and it's an absolute cheese. So if you're a beginner, maybe do that, or play through Arbration and get that experience of taming a Reaper through Arbration, because it's so much more satisfying, because it's a lot more difficult. In at the number 2 spot, we have got ourselves the Astrocetus, and it is definitely deserving of this, but it makes good sense as well. It is a massive, large, hunking beast of a creature, and when you close its mouth like that, you're going to get a lot of noise, and obviously its tail swish as well really is loud, but it's moving a heck of a lot of air, so it does make sense. But when you're in space, maybe not so much, because it's a vacuum, so sound can't travel. But anyway, we don't need to fact check all of it. Maybe space is not a vacuum in Ark. Maybe there are particles everywhere and sound can travel through it. Who knows? You know, it's not our own universe really, although the map of extinction is kind of supposed to be Earth, but we'll get around that. Maybe times are different. Physics has changed, physics has evolved, you know, but these are definitely really loud creatures. Makes sense, very obvious, and I'm sure everyone does know this by now. And at number 1, we've got the Bronto, and I guess I'll also put the Titanosaur here actually instead of where the Crocodile was. They fit under the same boat. These aren't particularly powerful creatures, but they are very large ones, and I don't really know why. To me, they seem like the absolute loudest creatures in the game, and also maybe quite an annoying one as well, with them just stomping all over the place. And if you have that camera shake on, your screen is going to be shaking like crazy. You can't see anything, and they're just so loud, and for some reason so continuous, and they'll just walk all over your bases for no reason, unless you have turrets, of course. Then they'll be dead soon, hopefully, but they are pretty tanky, so it will take a bit, which is why I just really try and not build a base in a Bronto. If I'm just building a base and then there's a Bronto in the area, I'm like, time to move. The Bronto cannot be near the base, I'm sorry. But then if a Bronto does spawn near the base later on, then that's just a shame, and the first thing I'll probably do is kill the Bronto, or maybe the Titanosaur, but they tend to not be as annoying because they're a lot rarer. Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to share with you the top 10 most undervalued Ark Tames. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. In at number 10, we have got the Megalodon, and this creature is here just simply because, like, I find with ocean creatures, people go for Basilos and creatures like that, and maybe Moses in the case of some bosses, and I feel like, you know, it's a bit undervalued in that sense, because, like, you know, it's the Megalodon. You would think that people will be taming this tons and tons, and they'd just be taming these things all over the place, but actually, from experience, people don't really tame these things that much, and I think that's a little bit of an undervaluement, if you will, because, you know, these creatures are actually pretty decent, and they deal the bleed ability, and yeah, maybe they're not as strong as something like a Mosa. I still find they are quite useful for just general underwater travel, and it's partly because I have a bias to Megalodons, because I'm not really a hater of these things. I love these things. I've been taming these things for years and years now, and obviously I'm going to be biased towards the creatures on this list, but I just find it's undervalued, and I feel like people should be taming this creature more, as I don't think it gets what it deserves, really.
So just to pause the video briefly, I do really need to talk about my Patreon, which you can find on Patreon. Of course, it is going to really add to your experience with this channel, at least it is in my opinion, purely because the Patreon has way more content out there for you to experience, and you get all of the big videos, and the channel's going towards bigger videos now a week early. So there's a video already out on the Patreon, which is why Ark is Ark worth it in 2024. I'll put it on screen now, and if you want to see it, then you can only see it on Patreon, or you can become a YouTube member, but I think Patreon is going to be the right choice for you. So if you really feel like you want to join the Patreon, then join. We've already got a couple of members there already, and I hope you're going to be the next.
Next up, we have got the Baryonyx, and this creature is here just because The Barry is one of those tames where I find they're so useful for doing caving, and people these days don't really use them that much, and I kind of feel like that's a shame really. These creatures are just so nicely and heavily used, or at least they were heavily used back in the day, and it seems like there's been a bit of a drop off with these things, and people tend to talk about them less and less. And yes, they're not the newest creatures out there, and maybe there are some other creatures which you might prefer for doing caving. That's perfectly acceptable, but I think people should still be taming these things and using these things. And I'm not saying like no one tames these things and that's a shame. I'm saying like people should tame these things more and experience them more, as loads of people actually just go caving on foot and they don't even bring a creature in, and they end up just dying loads of times. Like in cases like that, a Baryonyx can be really useful, especially considering on ASA at the moment you haven't got Shadow Mains and things like that, and you know they're so useful for that I find they really should be tamed more, and I think that they definitely do deserve more as creatures. It makes sense to tame them, but people these days are being a little bit more skimpish with them. Now, I also did want to put the Moser here as well. I did talk about earlier how, like, yeah, Mosers are stronger than Megalodons. They definitely are, but I find that these creatures are in some ways even more undervalued, and they definitely do need a lot more work than the Megalodon to become some really great creatures. Obviously, you got the X-Mosers and X-Megs on Gen 1, but still, the Moser these days actually isn't as used as much as you might think. It's not really used at all. Maybe you might use it for the Moder boss fights, but I find Spinos are commonly used in the case instead of Mosers for that, although people have obviously used Mosers for it. But now with loads of new sea creatures out with like mods and all of that, the Moser just seems very basic and in a lot of ways not really worth taming, and I think that's a bit of a shame. They definitely could do with some TLC, especially for the Moser over the Megalodon. And yeah, like the people just don't tame them as much as they used to, and you know they're supposed to kind of be the kings of the ocean, so in that sense it is quite a shame. In at number 7 we have got the Carb Enemies, and this creature is here just simply because, like, you know, it's so commonly just basically used as bait, essentially, in a way. Not exactly bait, but people just use these things to get loads of keratin out of them, and I find that actually as a tame creature they're pretty decent. And yes, maybe they're not the fastest in the world. This does have some increased speed, if you're wondering, by the way, because they are a lot slower than this usually. They're actually pretty decent at swimming in the water, and they're not the slowest things in the world, and give you a good introduction to that. You also, just as a general creature, they're just nice to have. It's useful to have a Carb Enemies, and yes, maybe they're not essential. I find if maybe they got a little bit of TLC, they really could be some great creatures which people use, like the Trike and the Stego. It could go to that extent if Wildcard gave these things a little bit more thoughts, because they're not really thought of commonly just as a general thing. You just think Carb Enemies is like, oh, the source of keratin, and that's kind of all you think of them. But if you think of them as a tame and actually try and get some use out of them, you'll find that these creatures are actually pretty decent as just a general underwater creature in the early stages of the game, and I definitely do use them for that quite a bit. And although yes, again, the speed is not the best, that is not going to be your main concern, especially in the early stages of the game. You just want those creatures that can actually just enable you to do those things. You're not really in a position where you want the best creatures out there, because you're not far enough in the game yet. Next up, we have got the Quetzal, and this creature is here because I found in the like 2015, 2016, wherever the Quetzal was released, I think it was late 2015, but it might have been to 2016. Again, not too sure on that, but either way, in those early stages of Ark, when the Quetzal came out, it was really just used so widely. It was such a cool creature, and although very difficult to tame, with that platform saddle on it, it really did make all the difference. And when the flyer speed leveling and all of that got nerfed, there was just a massive decline in Quetzals, as you know, they're not the fastest out there, and also there were just some other creatures came out that people might like to use more, and that's kind of where the Quetzals had a bit of a downfall. And nowadays the Quetzal isn't tamed all too much, at least not as much as I think it should. And yes, I definitely could say this creature could use some TLC just to buff it up a little bit, but also I kind of just prefer Ark with flyer speed leveling. I also do want to know your opinions. Are you pro flyer speed leveling, or are you against flyer speed leveling? Because I'm definitely very much for it. In at number 5, we've got the Carno, and I put this creature here as just people seem to dismiss the Carno for something like an Aloe, and although yes, that is objectively a better creature, I find that the Carno can be just extremely useful as quite an early on carnivore. You don't even need that saddle yet, and if you're on ASA, saddles are very easy to come by in drops, and also you can just kill an adult one, and then if it has a baby one attached to it, it's just such an easy, simple way of taming a Carno. Or you can just tame one the traditional way. It's really not that difficult whatsoever, and once you have one, they are a carnivore that can deal loads of bleed damage and just generally have quite a nice amount of mobility and quite a nice size as well. You can be pretty stealthy on a Carno, and although yes, maybe their footsteps are a bit louder than you might expect, you can be reasonably well hidden with a Carno, which maybe something like an Aloe or something larger than that, you would struggle a little bit, because, you know, Rexes kind of stick out a lot more than a Carno. Carnos just, they're a little bit more reserved, and I like them for that. They're a good bridge between something like a Raptor and an Aloe. It's just, they're such useful creatures, I find, and I use them tons and tons all over the place. And I find people really discount these creatures for creatures like Aloes, like I've said before, and I kind of find that's a shame, because I think these really do stand by themselves for being really great creatures. And obviously because of that, I'm going to put them on this list, because I find that they definitely are undervalued creatures, and I wish that people paid them a little bit more respect, as I think it is definitely well deserved. In at number 4, we've got the UT, and the UT isn't here just because people don't really use it. I find it's undervalued for its versatility, because people just use these things in boss fights for that one case where you buff your creatures, and that's it. People won't use them for other things, and I find that is a huge waste of a creature like this, as they are capable of dealing tons of damage, and you can even just use them to fight bosses with, although that's not my preferred use. They're just really great carnivores that can traverse maps just quite easily compared to something like the Rex, and obviously they're kind of better than Aloe in some ways and all of that, and obviously then you can debuff creatures. They just work really well as creatures to travel around the map with, and you can even do meta runs and things like that. And I know that seems a little bit far-fetched for some people, but I find that they are just really great creatures for that. And obviously the RG is going to be better for meta runs because it's a flying creature. Still, you could do quite a lot with something like a UT apart from just use it for fighting bosses. And I want to know, what do you use the UT for apart from in bosses? Because I'm not too sure if there's many people out there that use the UT for many other things apart from that, and that's why I think it's undervalued. I don't think it's undervalued as in people don't use this creature or care about this creature, because they do, but it's undervalued for its versatility. In at number 3, we've got the gas bags, and this creature is here just because I find it can just be a really useful Ark creature in general, and people don't really use it. And yes, there is a bit of a learning curve, and by the time I recorded this b-roll, I really wasn't great at flying this thing, but now I'm quite a significant amount better. I'm not going to say I'm a god at flying this thing, but I can actually get it to kind of move where I like. So I do excuse in advance my quite terrible gas bag flying, because yeah, I really did not do a great job with this b-roll. I have to re-record it at some point and, you know, get it all looking like I can't, that I can fly the gas bag instead of I can't. But either way, these creatures insanely useful just as a general tank as well. If you puff them up, there's a lot of damage reduction, and obviously great for doing meta runs and things like that, because they've got tons of weight, and you don't even need a saddle to ride one. But if you do chuck the saddle on, obviously you get extra armor and another player can join you. So it's actually quite useful if you have friends in the Ark world, and you know, you might want to bring one along with you for a meta run. And I know these are all quite basic uses for the gas bags. I find people don't really use them as much, and I know the Maywing is like that go-to traveling mount, and you can just do a lot with the Maywing. I find maybe give the gas bags a go if you have access to the gas bags, because I find they're a little bit undervalued as a creature, and I find people can do a lot with gas bags. It's just they don't really end up doing anything with them, and I find that's quite a shame really. I wish people did actually use these things a lot more because they just work so well in so many situations. Especially for turret soaking and metal runs, to just name the main two that they use for. So yes, gas bags, really undervalued creature in my opinion, and I hope that more people use this creature going into the future. In at number 2, we have got the Crystal Wyvern, and this creature is simply here because I find, compared to the normal Wyverns, these are extremely undervalued, and people have been saying that the Ember Crystal Wyvern is really a highlight for them. For me, it's the Blood Crystal Wyvern. Obviously, this I'm pretty sure is neither. It's just a Tropical Crystal Wyvern. They really are so useful, and a few people in my community have been saying yes, they definitely do really agree with this, and the general consensus is, oh, the Crystal Wyverns are just not as strong as Wyverns, but actually I find they're even more effective than all Wyverns, and that obviously does come from the fact that the taming method is a lot easier. Yes, it is capped behind level 60, and also you have to knock out one to get the primary crystal in the first place, but once you've done that, it's not really that difficult, and even that bit isn't difficult whatsoever. So, you know, these things are ridiculously easy to tame, and they're just such good creatures. They really do have to be on this list because people extremely undervalue them, and I find that they need to be on this list because they need more attention. They really do deserve it. They are great creatures which are strong in all aspects, apart from turning circles, but you know, that's not great on the Wyvern anyway, and I just find they're so useful for so many things, even more so than the Wyvern, although they're kind of the same creature, although I do find these are better because they're just easier to tame and there's a lot less of a lengthy process you have to go through to get them. I really do find they're extremely effective, and I wish people use these creatures more. And in at number 1, we've got the Bloodstalker, and this creature is here because I find, yes, people do use it for traveling and all of that. It gets a bit undervalued over the Maywing, and I find it can be really effective. Also, I do excuse my Bloodstalker flying. Really was not the best at flying it back when I recorded this B-roll, but I assure you I'm better now. And obviously I'm going to have to re-record those gas bags and Bloodstalker B-rolls. I will add it onto my list of stuff to do, but also I find that these are the best ocean creature out there. I know they're not ocean creatures, but they're the best kind of dealing with the underwater environment in my opinion, and I didn't show any of that in this B-roll, which is another reason why I really do need to re-record it. Either way, these creatures are just so great at traversing underwater environments. They're so quick and speedy, and they can deal quite hefty amounts of damage as well, which you might not expect. And maybe you're not going to take it to do alpha creatures, but you can just easily zip away from them. Also on top of that, they can glide on the top of the water as well, so kind of just to escape danger even more, you can just simply skim across the top of the water and get out of the way of all of those creatures that are trying to attack you. And also on top of that, you kind of do have like an awesome spyglass, but without the need for an awesome spyglass, so you can see the aggros of all the creatures. Extremely useful, especially in an underwater environment when the visibility isn't quite as great as obviously just on land. So I do find they're extremely useful for everything like that as well. And obviously if you're on Gen 1, you can warrant loads and loads of use out of these things. They're kind of like rock drakes in that sense. They are like a creature which you essentially really have to use for that purpose. So yes, in my opinion, the Bloodstalker is the most undervalued creature for what I think it could do. I just find people don't use it for that, and that's why I put it in at number 1.
So thank you to my wonderful patrons Ekaterina Puchkova, Karina Thorne, Dominic Masijewski, and Ethan Tapia, who have all supported me through Patreon or through YouTube memberships. If you want to join this list, then go join Patreon or YouTube members, but thanks to all of these guys.